I was standing in a quiet hallway of a nursing home when my grandfather finally looked at me and asked one simple question. Did they really sell it? The hallway smelled like disinfectant and old paper, the kind of smell that tells you time moves differently inside these walls. The fluorescent lights hummed softly above us, steady and indifferent. I had just arrived from the airport less than an hour earlier, my body still running on European time, my uniform wrinkled from travel. When he asked that question, his voice was calm. Not confused, not weak, calm in a way that made my stomach tighten. I already knew that whatever answer I gave would change everything. I told him the truth. While I was stationed at Ramstein Air Base in Germany, my father had sold his antique watch, the one he promised me, and used the money to help buy my half-sister a $15,000 car. My grandfather did not raise his voice. He did not cry. He did not even sigh. He reached slowly for his phone, scrolled until he found one name, and pressed call. When the line connected, he said only 7 words. It is time they met my lawyer. In that moment, everything I thought I understood about my family began to collapse. My name is Keely Hartman. I am 31 years old, and I have been serving in the United States Air Force for almost 9 years. When this story began, I was stationed overseas at Ramstein, living out of a suitcase, counting weeks by deployment schedules and time zones instead of birthdays and holidays. From the outside, my family probably looked respectable, stable, the kind of family that smiled at church on Sundays and sent carefully worded Christmas cards every year. But from the inside, it had always been uneven. My mother passed away when I was young. For a long time, it was just me, my father Robert, and my grandfather, his father, who lived nearby and quietly filled in the gaps. When my father remarried, I was 16. He gained a new wife and a new daughter, Lauren, my half-sister. She was 4 years younger than me, bright, fashionable, and immediately adored. Lauren became the center of gravity in our household. Her milestones were celebrated loudly. Her mistakes were explained away gently. I was the one who was told, "You are strong, Emily. You will be fine." And I believed that. I built my entire life around it. Joining the military felt like the most honest choice I could make. Structure, accountability, a world where promises mattered and responsibility was earned, not handed out based on charm or appearances. My grandfather understood that in a way no one else did. He had served too, back when uniforms were heavier and words like honor were spoken without irony. And there was the watch. An antique Hamilton wristwatch from the 1940s, worn smooth from decades of use. My grandfather received it from his own father and wore it every day of his working life. He used to tap the glass and say it reminded him that time was something you earned, not something you wasted. When I was 23, just before my first overseas assignment, he took it off his wrist and placed it in my hand. One day he said, looking directly at my father, "This will be yours. You understand its value." I never wore it. I kept it stored carefully in its original case at my grandfather's house. To me, it was not an accessory. It was a promise. While I was stationed in Germany, life moved forward in 2 separate timelines. Mine was measured in early mornings, flight schedules, and quiet phone calls home when the signal allowed. Theirs was measured in upgrades, social events, and conversations that happened without me. I did not realize how far apart those timelines had drifted until the first casual comment slipped through the distance. "Lauren finally got the car she wanted," my father said during one of our calls, pride thick in his voice. "That is great," I replied automatically. "What did she get?" There was a pause on the line. "Something imported," he said. "Special." I remember smiling to myself, thinking it was ironic he mentioned Europe while I was the one actually living there. I did not ask about the price. I did not ask how. I assumed foolishly that it was not my business. 2 weeks later, the nursing home called. My grandfather had taken a small fall. Nothing catastrophic, they said, but it was time to consider longer-term care. I requested emergency leave and flew home as soon as approval came through. Jet lag clung to me like fog when I landed, but I went straight from the airport to see him. That was when I noticed the empty drawer. My grandfather kept the watch in the top drawer of his nightstand, wrapped in a faded handkerchief. The drawer slid open too smoothly. Inside there was nothing. For a moment I told myself I was mistaken, that maybe he had moved it, that my eyes were tired. I asked the nurse casually if my grandfather had requested any personal items be stored elsewhere. She shook her head. When my father arrived later that afternoon, I asked him directly, "Where's Grandpa's watch?" He did not meet my eyes. "We took care of some things," he said. "You do not need to worry about it." That phrase had followed me my entire life. It had always meant the opposite. I pressed him. He sighed, clearly irritated. "Emily, you are not here. You do not see the full picture. Adult decisions had to be made." That night I barely slept. Every instinct drilled into me by the military told me something was wrong. The next morning, sitting beside my grandfather's bed as sunlight filtered through thin curtains, he asked the question himself. Did they really sell it? I swallowed hard and told him the truth. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. If I am being honest, none of this should have surprised me. The signs had been there for years. I just did not know how to name them back then. Or maybe I did, but naming them felt like betrayal. When my father remarried, he said we were starting fresh. At 16, that sounded hopeful. I wanted to believe families could reset like machines after an update. What actually happened was that the rules changed and no one explained them to me. Lauren arrived with ease. Space was made for her. Birthdays grew bigger. Conversations revolved around her plans, her dreams, her needs. If she wanted something, the question was not if, but when. I learned to sit quietly at the table, nodding, smiling, waiting for my turn to speak, and often watching it pass. My father used to say, "Emily is independent. She does not need much." It sounded like praise. It felt like permission to be overlooked. My grandfather noticed. He always did. He lived 10 minutes away in a small house that smelled of coffee and old books. When I was home, I stopped by in the evenings just to sit with him. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we watched the news in silence. "You chose a hard road," he once said, pouring coffee into chipped mugs. Hard does not mean wrong. When I joined the Air Force, my father told everyone how proud he was. Maybe he was. But pride did not look like understanding. It did not look like learning the difference between a duty station and a deployment. It did not look like asking how it felt to miss holidays and birthdays. Lauren stayed close to home. She went to the right schools, dated the right people, and learned how to move through rooms where appearances mattered more than substance. My stepmother adored her. My father admired her. Together they formed a unit I was never really part of. The car made that painfully clear. A photo on social media. Lauren smiling beside a sleek, dark blue luxury sedan. The caption read, "New Beginnings." The comments flooded in. Congratulations. Heart emojis. Jokes about how lucky she was. Something about it did not sit right. Lauren did not earn that kind of money. My father had always preached financial discipline like a moral code. I called him that night. "That is quite a car," I said. "She deserves something nice," he replied. "She has been working hard." "At what?" I asked before I could stop myself. There was a pause. "Emily," he said, warning already creeping into his voice. "You would not understand. You are not here." That phrase again. I let it go. Or at least I tried to. Then came the confrontation. "We needed liquidity," my father said when I pressed him later. "Lauren had an opportunity. A car like that opens doors. It was just sitting there. That watch was not yours to sell," I said. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Your grandfather is fragile. He does not need stress. If you upset him and something happens, that is on you. Do you really want to live with that?" The words settled heavily between us. They were meant to scare me, and for a moment they worked. But that night, watching my grandfather sleep, I realized something I had avoided my entire life. Silence had never protected anyone in this family. It had only made room for the wrong people to act without consequence. And for the first time, I knew I could not be quiet anymore. The next morning, I went back to the nursing home alone. The hallway was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums instead of rests. My grandfather was awake, sitting slightly upright, his eyes focused on the pale winter light coming through the window. He looked at me the way he always did when he knew something mattered. "You did not answer me yesterday," he said gently. "Not all the way." I pulled a chair close and sat. My hands felt cold even though the room was warm. "They sold it," I said. "Dad sold the watch." He closed his eyes, not in shock but in recognition. "How much?" he asked. "Most of it went toward a car for Lauren, a very expensive one." He exhaled slowly. "And they thought I would not notice." "They thought you would not be told," I said. A faint smile touched his lips, but there was no humor in it. "Your father has always mistaken silence for ignorance." He reached for the small table beside his bed. "Hand me my phone." I did. He scrolled through his contacts with steady fingers and pressed call. "James," he said when the line connected. "It is time." When he hung up, I stared at him. "Who was that?" "My lawyer," he replied simply. "He has been my lawyer for over 30 years. Longer than your father has been an adult." I realized then that this was not impulsive. This was prepared. "I hoped it would not come to this," he said. "But hope is not a plan." He asked me to do one thing. "Come to the gathering this weekend. Dress nicely. Do not argue. Do not explain. Just be present." When I told my father I had spoken to Grandpa, his reaction was immediate. "You told him," he snapped. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" "I told the truth," I said. He laughed sharply. "You always had a flair for drama. He will forget by tomorrow." "You do not know him very well," I said. He hung up. Sunday arrived quietly. I visited my grandfather first. He was dressed neatly, wearing the sweater he saved for important days. "If the lesson is going to mean anything," he said, "it needs witnesses." The house was already full when I arrived. Laughter spilled onto the porch. Music played softly inside. Everything looked the same. polished furniture, framed family photos. Lauren stood near the window, showing someone pictures of the car. When she saw me, her smile faltered, then returned. Emily, you made it. Of course, I said. My father appeared moments later, drink in hand. Let us keep things pleasant today, he said. Always, I replied. He raised his glass. Family means everything to us. We are proud to support Lauren's future. Applause followed. Then a man I did not recognize stepped forward. Robert Carter, he said calmly. My father frowned. My name is James Holloway. I am your father's attorney. The room went silent. James opened his briefcase with deliberate care. The watch that was sold several weeks ago was held in trust, he said. A trust created 5 years ago, designated for a specific beneficiary. He turned toward me. Keeley Hartman. The murmurs started immediately. The proceeds from the unauthorized sale must be returned to the trust within 60 days, he continued. The funds were used toward the purchase of a vehicle valued at $15,000. Lauren gasped. It is an asset, James corrected. He turned another page. The house, he added, still belongs to your father. You live here by permission, not ownership. My father's face drained of color. This is absurd, he said. She manipulated him. James met his gaze. Your father was of sound mind. He anticipated this exact scenario. Emily is the sole beneficiary. The silence was absolute. This is not revenge, James said. This is accountability. The gathering dissolved without ceremony. Guests left in small groups, murmuring excuses, avoiding eye contact. No one stayed to help clean up. The celebration had curdled into something no one wanted to be associated with. My father sat at the table long after everyone had gone, staring at nothing. I went to the nursing home that night. You stood when it mattered, my grandfather said. The weeks that followed were quiet but heavy. Arrangements were made, deadlines set, paperwork signed. Lauren returned the car. The dealership offered far less than what had been paid. The loss was significant. So was the lesson. My father moved out 2 months later. He did not use the full time he was given, and we spoke once on the phone. I should have protected that watch, he said. Yes, I replied. You should have. It was not an apology. It was accountability. My grandfather passed away in April. At the funeral, I spoke about time, about truth, about integrity. Afterward, James handed me a small velvet box. Inside was the watch. The trust had repurchased it quietly. I keep it wrapped in the same faded handkerchief. Sometimes I wear it when I need reminding of who I am. Life did not become perfect, but boundaries were set. And I re-enlisted not because I was running, but because I finally knew what I was standing on. I do not wear the watch every day. Most of the time, it stays in my desk drawer, wrapped in the same faded handkerchief my grandfather used for decades. When I open the drawer, I can still smell the faint trace of oil and time, like something earned rather than given. The ticking is steady, unimpressed by excuses, unmoved by emotion. Life did not reset after that Sunday. Families do not suddenly become fair just because the truth comes out. Lauren and I speak occasionally now, carefully, like people walking across thin ice. My father and I keep our distance, not out of anger, but out of respect for boundaries that took far too long to establish. I learned something important through all of this. Standing up for yourself is not the same as hurting others. For most of my life, I believed that being quiet made me strong, that enduring made me noble, that swallowing discomfort was the price of keeping peace. But silence is not always sacrifice. Sometimes it is permission. Permission for people to take what was never theirs. Permission for patterns to continue unchecked. Permission for promises to be broken without consequence. The military taught me many things. Discipline, responsibility, accountability. But my grandfather taught me something just as important. Time tells the truth even when people do not. Justice does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it comes quietly, through paperwork, deadlines, and the courage to let consequences unfold. Sometimes the hardest part is not watching others fall, but standing still long enough to let yourself rise. I re-enlisted because I finally understood what I was serving, my values, my name, my integrity. If this story resonated with you, I want to ask you something. Have you ever stayed silent to keep peace, only to realize the cost was yourself? Have you ever had to draw a line with family, knowing it would change everything? Boundaries are not betrayal, they are self-respect. And sometimes the greatest inheritance is not an object at all, but the courage to stop accepting less than you deserve. Thank you for listening.